Yeah. So what we've been doing here is right now we have 2 circling labs that run every week. And so we have, they're actually at a bit of an odd time here. Mm-hmm. So they're from noon to 3 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays. And it's actually interesting that, it seems like people in Boulder can afford to come in during those times.
Yeah.
A lot of people who do apparently have free time during that. Yeah. So what we've been doing is, the intention really was to open a space so that people could practice and people could come and get introduced to the practice. Let's see. Yeah. So typically what we're doing is we break the 3 hours into 2 parts. So we have, a first segment in the case of, if we're starting at noon, usually you have one segment that runs from noon to 1:20, and then we take a 10-minute break and start at 1:30 and go to 3 o'clock. And so we kind of break the time out like that. Now, we used to do labs on Tuesday evenings at 7, from 7 to 9, which is 2 hours, in which case we just kind of did one kind of round. Interesting thing was here, actually not a lot of people more people showed up for noon to 3 than did for 7 to 9, so eventually we canceled it. I imagine it would probably be very different in other parts of the other cities or other parts of the world. So that's kind of what we've been doing. And typically the format is people come in and I introduce myself and set a bit of context for the structure, just kind of like I did. I was like, so we're going to go from this time to this time, so we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go from 1:30 to 3, and then I guess I'm setting logistical context first, and then because this is the Integral Center, talk about it's for your first time and it's $20 otherwise, and we want you to be a member. And if you're a member, it's free each time you come. So we're setting context like that at the beginning, just for the logistics, to get people comfortable. Yeah. And then after that, we get check-ins. We get check-ins from everybody.
So then you sit in a circle together?
Yeah, we're all sitting in a circle.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in a circle, people come in, we're sitting in a circle, I'm explaining how the time works and all of that, and what the event fee is and all of that. And then I get check-ins from everyone, so I ask everyone to say their name and how they're feeling. And of course you can adapt that. There's any number of ways you can get. People do fun things sometimes, like say your name and your favorite flavor of ice cream, or make a sound that represents how you're feeling, or just explain, or just how you're doing today. So I usually get a round of check-ins and names from everybody, and then we set, if there are people who have never come to circling before, then we're setting context for what circling is and how it works.
And what I'm a little interested. How you tell about that?
Awesome. Cool. I want to get into that. Do you mind just me finishing the structure? Yes. So so after explaining all of that, we usually do our first round of circles. So we usually, thankfully here, I have a number of other facilitators who come in, or people who are going through the T3 Train the Trainer circling facilitation training, who come in, or who've graduated from that, and I'm usually trusting them to lead or facilitate the circles. So we usually split the group out. If it's a lot, usually if it's more than 7 or 8 people, we'll usually split the group out into 2 or 3. Sometimes we have 20, 25 people, in which case we might split it into 3 or 4, depending on how many facilitators are available.
So many is normally in one circle in those?
Yeah.
How many?
Usually we need at least 3 people for it to be considered a circle.
3?
Yeah. So Decker doesn't really consider it a circle unless there's 3 people there.
Yeah. So we're now a circle thanks to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So,
and then obviously size, you can do whatever. So it's whatever serves.
Okay. Yeah. I usually have 3 to 7 people, if, I typically make a request that people even out the circles as much as possible.
That they
even out the circles, so that there's an even split, even number of people as close as possible. Otherwise, it can often get very lopsided. which is fine. It's just a preference of mine.
You mean the same amount of people in the two circles, or
Yeah.
just an even number?
Like same amount of people.
Okay.
Yeah. So we try to have somewhat of a balance. Although it can be interesting if only two people. There's only three people in a circle.
Yeah.
Usually the person has to deal with like, why aren't people in my circle? And that's what we circle them on.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
But yeah, and then and usually we have some time at the end of the circle to debrief, maybe 10 minutes or so, to talk about what the circle was or how it went and why they made certain choices, where it could have gotten better, where it was going really well, and then we take a 10-minute break.
So, when you said one,
Why don't I?
you said one, after the check-in you said one round, and then you,
Yeah.
and then you choose somebody, or somebody says they want to have a birthday.
Yeah, so usually we're asking people, so let me just write this out here for sake of clarity, it's probably easier to look at something. So if we're starting at noon, like first I do logistics, and then I get check-ins, right? And then we set context, which we'll talk about. Right? And then we go to usually somewhere around, it's usually somewhere between like 12:30 to 40 that we are setting up the first round of circles. Right, so first I need to be aware of how many people can actually facilitate circles, so I can be aware of how many groups we can split into or can't split into. And then based off of that, I'm like, okay, so does anybody want to be circled? Does anybody want to have a birthday circle? Right? And then people often volunteer themselves. There's too many, then I have to start prioritizing. I have to be like, okay, so...
Is the birthday circle just you're in the circle?
Birthday circle means that we're focusing on one person specifically.
Okay.
So that's different from the organic circle where it's just, it can go anywhere.
Okay.
Right. So, let's see. So yeah, we're asking, like, who wants to be circled? And then if there's more people than we can take, we might find a way to either split the time, or usually I'm prioritizing who's more burning or who has more desire. And typically people will, they'll fall back. They'll be like, actually, I'm okay either way, or, or I can do it the second round, or whatever it is. So we go through that process, and that process is actually, it gets harder. The bigger the group it is, it gets harder to do, of course. And it's more, for me at least, taxing to pay attention and keep track of everybody. And then, so we actually circle until, so once we do that, we split, and then we're circling until 1:20. And then there's a break. I'm trying to do this here. Apologize for my handwriting. So this is the first round.
Yes, it's about 50 minutes you have left.
Yeah, we usually have about 40, 50 minutes to circle. And then we take that 10-minute break. And usually for about 10, 15 minutes, we're
Setting it up again.
There's a debrief. So we'll share in the big group about how much, like how it was. People will share, like,
so
I got
quarter
this.
to 3, you mean?
From 1:30 to 1:45.
Oh, you debriefed the one before?
Yeah, but in a big group.
Yeah.
Right. So if people have debriefed it before as part of the circle, that might happen. It may not happen. If you're working with a lot of people who are new, it's usually better to debrief.
Got it.
Yeah. And I can talk a bit more about why specifically, aside from probably the obvious. But, And then so in the big group, we're kind of sharing like, how was that for you? People share about what they've either discovered about relating this way or what they've gotten about themselves or what it's like to be with somebody else.
Yeah.
And we're usually doing that from 1:30 to 1:45. And then setting up the next round. So set up right. You set up the second round. Very much the same way as before, and then we're usually circling until 2:50-ish, 2:45, 2:50-ish, and then we do a final. Or I guess maybe probably group sharing would probably be a better way of talking about it.
So when you set up the second round. Would that mean that you maybe go with another facilitator or other people?
Yeah, so everybody comes back to the big circle, and then again we're going. So who wants to be circled for the second round of circles? It's very much kind of like what Porcelli's doing over there. Yeah, and then people kind of find someone who facilitates, someone to be facilitated, and then we're kind of splitting off again and circling.
Do you always have someone being circled?
So we often have organic circles as well.
Okay.
And I typically don't prioritize those as much as the birthday circles, just because I think they're more complex to run. And they're often a lot more difficult to run with people who are new, who aren't familiar with that way of being in the first place, or that way of relating. And it can get very tricky often. My experience is that it's been tricky a lot of times.
Now we have the frames. So what I would love to hear, I said it before, what you tell people about, and also a little bit how they can be in the circle, because we have learned to how we can paraphrase or we can you say while sharing that I feel. Do you learn them a way to be in the circle, or?
Yeah. So
that's the part I'm curious of. Also.
Cool. Let me just say one quick thing. So this is for 3 hours. That's if you have 3 hours to run a circling lap.
Yeah, I would do one.
I would recommend that you have at least 2 hours, or at least an hour and a half would probably be good to run a circle and be able to hold everything that comes up around that, and all people sharing and setting that up. You probably at least need 90 minutes to do that. In which case you can just kind of condense. You can shift or move this however you want. Typically you have to go through this process and then the debrief and closing, setting everything up and then closing it down at the end. Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about that, because that's what I'm also excited to talk about. So, what are our main concerns? So, the biggest kind of problem that I've come up, or issue that I've come up with running these labs is people coming in with certain expectations and either kind of not being clear about, if those expectations don't get met, not being clear about what circling is or why those expectations aren't being met, and often leaving with stories about what happened or what circling is that aren't actually on the same page with my story about what happened or what's going on. And those typically cause the biggest problem for me. So I've collected a number of stories like this during my time here. And so for whatever reason, people often come in who are very well versed in other modalities, and we'll try to bring that modality into circling in a therapeutic context. And we spend a lot of time like, that's not what we're doing here. That's not circling. And they can often get very frustrated with it. Or people just leaving with stories that don't don't match what we're doing or don't seem to understand what exactly the practice values. Like a lot of people come in and they're like, say things that aren't circling, right? And so the facilitator will be like, hold on, that's not circling. And they can leave with people. I've heard people be like, why do I have to adjust what I'm saying all the time? Why do I have to speak in a format it's not enjoyable? I don't want to do that, or have to do that, without really being clear about why that's important for the practice and why it's necessary and why we value that. And oftentimes, a while back, we had an event here where people got to have like a very brief introduction to circling. That actually I wasn't running; someone else was running. But I happened to run into one of the people who had been here for that outside of the center, and I was like, "Oh, so you came to see what circling was like, and cool. And what was that like for you? Did you like it?" And the person responded. It seemed like all the facilitator was doing was telling the person what their experience was the entire time, right? And I was kind of heartbroken because that is definitely not what was happening. I was there, and so but actually it's definitely not what was happening. And it might have seemed like it, but what wasn't clearly communicated was that the facilitator was offering how that person was, or offering what that person's experience was. So we try to set up the situation and explain things in a way that doesn't create, as much as possible, doesn't leave like a huge window for people to create those kinds of stories or leave with those kinds of stories that would potentially be detrimental to having people have a positive experience, even though it might be a challenging experience.
Can you share what you say? Can you introduce how we do it?
Cool.
Yeah, what's the intention? Why? How we do it? Concrete?
Cool.
Yeah. Really nice.
Cool. So I'll get into that. And sorry that I hope it doesn't seem like I'm putting it off, but just like I want to tell you about how the mindset that I had in order to create that, so that you can actually have that mindset. What's more important than me giving you? I can give you an outline. But I think what's more important than me giving you an outline is you actually getting the mentality, the way of thinking that I used to create that, so you can understand why I created that. And there might be some limitations also to the way I created that as well. But also so you can actually take on that mindset and you can create anything if necessary. Right? So I for a hobby, when I was maybe like 8 years or something like that, more like at the end of high school through college. As a hobby, I did magic. So I did a lot of kind of sleight of hand, that kind of stuff.
What?
Sleight of hand.
What's that?
Like, pick a card, sleight of hand. So, and what they do, what magicians do, is they don't typically, unless they're improving, is that they don't make up what they're going to do or what they're going to say on the spot, right? They go back and they plan and they go, okay, I have this trick, and they actually write out a script of like, this is what I'm going to say, and then this is what this person probably going to respond in this kind of way. And so they actually have a script, and they actually have like a repertoire of several things that they can do, and they're bringing those things at any moment. So what I'm doing when I'm explaining circling is I'm being very clear about what the point is that I'm trying to make, and what I'm saying, and I'm trying to be as consistent as I possibly can with it, right? Which is part of what they do. If I'm going to do a trick, I'm going to be as consistent as I possibly can with what I say, with how I do it over and over, because that gives me very clear feedback, right? If I'm inconsistent, I'm going to get inconsistent feedback. If I keep changing my explanation each time, I'm not going to be clear about whether my explanation is actually getting any better as I do it, or it's getting worse. So I need to be very clear about, when I started, I actually wrote out several times what my context setting was for circling, so that I could be as consistent as possible about explaining that thing the same way, using the same words, so that because my feedback at the end after I set context for circling is it clear? Does that make sense to you? and people go, well, what about this? Right? Or I don't really get about that. And I can go, okay, cool, so I need to add that in so that people don't have to ask that question again, so we're clear about it. And so then I'll go back to my script and I'll see, okay, I missed it here, I need to reword this here, and I'll add it back in. And then I do everything exactly the same except for those changes. And then I'll go out again and then see like, oh, so does that make sense now? Mm-hmm. People will say, yes, sure, great. But then there's this thing, right? And so I go back to the drawing board and go through my script and then I'm going to change this, right? Now, so it's like if I'm not consistent with what I'm saying each time, I'm not going to get feedback that I need to be clear about whether it's working or not. Now, that said, once I have something in my back pocket like that I can just kind of pull out whenever I need to explain things to people, then I have much more freedom if someone comes in who has come in from a unique context or something like that I can actually adapt that to what those people need, right? And then if something happens, if I'm like, oh, okay, so that doesn't make much sense, then I can go back to, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to my kind of standard explanation that I've worked on so far, so we have something to fall back on, right? And then I can go back to working on adapting my explanation if I need to. Does that all that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for that you come to what you are saying. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Me more to hear.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's good anyway to hear.
Yeah.
So it could, it's good to have the idea how you work with it.
Right. So I have now a kind of a mental library of several pieces or distinctions or explanations that I can bring out any point and start going into, and I can try to start to adapt it to someone on the fly if I need to, but I have something to fall back on.
Yeah, you're talking to experience.
Yeah. So what I found doing this process is that there are several questions that need to be answered for people to feel like they understand what circling is and what we're doing. And so there's 5 main questions that I answer as I'm setting context. The first one is, what kind of practice is circling? And the second one is...
will you, when you ask the question, will you say what you are telling also?
Sure. Do you mind if I give you the whole thing first?
The whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, so what kind of practice is it? What does it look like? What isn't circling?
That's a good one.
What is circling? And then why do I care? Right. So, for example, my context is usually something like, so circling is a relational practice. It's a meditation that we do with each other, rather than me just kind of sitting by myself on a meditation cushion and meditating.
Yeah.
This is a very unique form of meditation that we do with each other. It's a relational practice. It's a practice of being connected, of being more intimate together with our experience of what's happening ourselves. So that answers the first question, gives us a ballpark of this isn't a sport, right? So the second thing is, what does it look like? So often people kind of skip into, when I offer people who set context for the first time to set context, they often skip into, well, we're getting someone's world. It's like, hold on, they don't even know what this looks like. So let's first go with, so what it looks like is we're usually sitting in a circle of about 3 to 7 people. And we are...
Does that include the facilitator?
Yeah. So we're sitting in a circle with 3 to 7 people, and there's a facilitator who's guiding the group. And there's one person who's volunteered themselves to be the center of focus of that group for about 30 to 60 minutes.
May I ask you,
Sure.
do you, so that you tell them explicitly?
Yes.
Yeah, like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
What I'm telling you right now is pretty much exactly
great.
verbatim what I tell people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So we're sitting in a group of 3 to 7 people. There's a facilitator who's guiding the group. There's usually one person who's volunteered themselves to be circled, to be the center focus for that group for that time period. And so that's what it looks like, right? So now people have something to imagine. What I still haven't figured out what to do is often people imagine that the person who's being circled is in the center of the circle, which they're not usually, right? So it probably works if like we had a circle. It probably works to actually reference, like, so if we were circling you right now, we would be here and I would be facilitating and we would put our attention on that person for 30 to 60 minutes. And so, yeah. And what we're doing, so I'm continuing, what we're doing is we're going to begin a dialogue with the person that we have our attention on, with the entire group.
Yeah.
Of what is it like for us as the group to be with you? And what is it like for you to be with us?
That's still under the two, under the
Yeah, the two pretty much. Right. And then, let's see, so yeah, what is it like? And then when we start, and then we go, so we're putting our attention on this person, and what we're doing is we're not giving them any advice. We're not therapizing them. We're not trying to fix anything. We're not telling them how they should feel, what they should think, what they should do, anything in any way that would imply somehow that they should be different from how they are right now. And what we are doing instead is we're getting their world, we're getting what it's like to be them in each moment. And so it usually helps to be as specific as possible. So I usually like to give a specific example. So I might be like, so we're sitting in the group and we put our attention on someone, and they might be like, wow, actually I feel nervous right now, right? And so rather than saying something like, oh, that's okay, we're all here to care for you, or or saying something like, it's okay, just take a few breaths and you can calm down, or that's fine, you'll be all right, or something like, well, try being more confident, and you'll be good, right? Rather than saying anything like that, instead we're just going to get what it's like, right? So we are just going to get, oh, so you're nervous. Is it like, do you feel buzzing in your chest? Or is it butterflies in your stomach? Do you feel nervous that we might judge you? Or are you nervous that you might embarrass yourself somehow? Right? Or maybe feel pressure to perform or to do something for us. Is that what the nervous is? So usually giving a very specific example like that will clarify what the kind of the vague term of like we're not therapizing and
just inquire and be aware.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so we do that for about 30 to 60 minutes with that person. We're just continually getting more and more of the nuances of their experience. And then what I usually do it in the order that I just gave you. I think it can often be more engaging for some people to have the last question of like, why do I care about it? to be and maybe a bit sprinkled in through there, or maybe at the beginning to introduce it that way. But
I have a little. Is it also for the participant who are not in not having birthday to also to try to feel how it's like?
Yeah.
That they engage.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah. So it's more than just listening to that the person is nervous.
Right.
It's maybe also to feel it, or you say
thank you for bringing that up. So usually it's like so as part of the what is circling question, so it's like we might inquire like that, like the nervousness, and often what I'll add in is, and what we might also do is we might also notice what it's like to be with somebody. We might actually feel the impact of being with them in service of getting what it's like for them.
Yeah.
Right. So I might notice, like the same example, I might notice like, oh, when I put my attention on you as opposed to somebody else, I actually feel like this sense of like something heightened and a bit of like trembling or shaking. And you're like, is that what your nervousness is like? Is that just me, or does that have something to do with what's going on for you? So we can also not just inquire, but share from our experience and get more of that person that way.
So do you talk to people about owning their words?
Yeah, we do. I haven't as much of late, but we do that. So I'll add that on. Let me get to the next question, which is about why I care. So I think mine's a bit vague. I would invite you to find something that's even more specific. And so what I often share is like what I think is so amazing or beautiful about this practice is that it's an actual service of actually just slowing down and just really being with someone and actually just celebrating what it's like to be with them in that space. And they get this beautiful experience of being celebrated just for who they are and just being appreciated and seen in that. And there's not any intervention that we're doing, right? There's not any procedure that we're doing with them. It's just a virtue of slowing down and bothering to care about what it's like to be with them and what it's like to be them. That we get to share in this discovery of who they are. And usually in the space of that seeing, of being with someone like that, if someone actually slows down enough to be that way with me, I discover something new about myself.
Yeah, and that humanness that we're all in together.
That I never knew before. And I get to take that discovery out with me into the rest of my life. Right? So that's usually the kind of explanation that I give. And if you just follow I really don't want people to, there's some things that you'll have to say, and I'm saying them because I need to say that for clarity. But the thing about the 5 questions is, what kind of practice is it? What does it look like? What isn't circling? What is circling? Why do you care? Like, you can answer those questions on your own. And figure out what those things are to you. And explain them, come up with your own specific, maybe moment you were impacted by circling that changed your life or someone else's life, or some specific thing, that moment where you did get someone's world that you can use as an example, like that is what circling is. Or when someone tried to say something and it was like, that's not what circling is, that you can incorporate your own experience into it, rather than just becoming copying what I just said verbatim. So, yeah. Are we good so far? Is all?
Yeah, I just saw that. I was thinking, what is not circling? But you said that I didn't put the number on it.
Okay.
What you said about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So how do you talk about projection?
Right. So I think I've been working on this for a while, and it's really the kind of one of the more difficult parts. Particularly because people have a challenge with it if they're not aware of any kind of communication practices. And people can often get very frustrated with being told what they're saying isn't circling. And then if the facilitator doesn't invite them to offer them a way to correct or a way to change their languaging or where they're coming from so that it actually is owned, people can often leave feeling like, oh, they just told me what I couldn't do.
Yeah,
And
that they are
yeah,
wrong. Yeah,
yeah.
that's why that too, that you
Yeah.
wrong them.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that I look out for and try to do my best to make sure people don't leave with that kind of a story. Because then, it doesn't help.
No, no.
So I think the easiest way to explain to people what projection is or what ownership is to just a presence that it's interesting that our language, like I can speak grammatically correct English without actually taking authority for my experience. And so the way our language works is that we can actually take something that's my experience and make it about something else, right? So I might be like, that was a really good movie. Right? And what I'm actually doing, what actually happened was I enjoyed the movie. Right? But I'm actually making it about the movie. Like, the movie was good, therefore I enjoyed it. Rather than owning, I had an enjoyable experience watching the movie, and other people might not have. Right? So if I make it about the movie, if I go, that was an enjoyable movie, then I'm projecting, I'm taking something that's my experience and making it about something that's outside of me, rather than actually owning that it was my experience of that thing and it was my unique response to how that was.
So, and noticing that when we speak grammatically correctly without taking ownership, it's always judgmental.
Right.
Whether it's positive or negative.
Right. What we used to do is give people a format of, there's an exercise that we often do in a lot of trainings called, what is it? So what I notice, what I imagine, and then checking. So what I would often say is like, so if you want to participate, like what you can do is first notice what you notice. Right? So and what I'm noticing is inarguable. Right? So I might notice that their head is down, their eyebrows kind of furrowed maybe, and, so that's what I'm noticing. And what I'm imagining is maybe that they're sad. That they're unhappy about something. But that's just my imagining. I don't actually know whether that's accurate. It's just, I'm kind of hallucinating. For all I know, either I'm totally spot on or I could be totally hallucinating some kind of experience for that person.
Yeah.
So rather than just going on my assumption about what they're experiencing, I'm actually going to check. I'm actually be like, so are you feeling sad? And so I often actually demonstrate this with someone who's sitting in the circle and actually do this process with them of being like, so I notice that you're like, you seem really attentive. I imagine that you're paying attention and enjoying what I have to say. Is that true? And they'll be like, either like, yeah, I'm really curious or I want to understand. Or some people like, actually I'm really confused or actually I'm thinking about this other thing that's bugging me while you're talking.
So you come with some examples of when you teleported?
I usually actually do it with somebody.
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you show a little, for instance, like how...
Like right now I'm yawning. So you can say to me.
Yeah, so I know that she's yawning.
Oh yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, I imagine that you're sleepy. I don't know. So I'll actually check. Are you feeling tired right now?
I think I'm just hungry.
Okay. So that's interesting. I don't know.
I feel relaxed and attentive.
Okay. So now I'm clear with you. I don't have to go off of my imagining. You're relaxed, you're attentive, and probably hungry. And then I could actually keep going with you. Right? I could be like, oh, you're attentive. Like, what's the quality of attentiveness? Is it like an intellectual attentiveness? Is it more of like an emotional excitement or engagement or being drawn forward? and so we could keep going. And that's usually what we do during a circle and how people are invited to participate.
Are people getting it? So, like this? What's your experience?
People seem to get it, and people seem to need, like a lot of people who are starting out, there's a lot of people coming who are hesitant.
They are?
Yeah, they're hesitant to share because it might not be right. It might not be the right way. So I'm often inviting people trying to invite those people to not share or not be concerned as much about that, and just invite the facilitator to correct those things. People seem to get it. It takes a bit at first to try to explain and get them to do that with their verbiage so that they're actually staying within the format of circling. Yeah.
So when someone says, well, if I'm, say I'm going to say something I'm not going to own something, do you return to this context? Calling them out, or is it that totally dependent on what's said in their comment?
It depends. I'm trying to get more and more better at this. Is kind of also the part that's challenging for me. So oftentimes there's only so much space, like so much is happening already, like emotionally in the circle, that there's only so much space to just stop the person and keep going. In which case afterwards I do my best to make sure people understand why I stopped them and that they were good with me, so they don't leave with like some kind of story about, like I talked about. And then
so they stay present.
Yeah, so they stay present with the whole thing, with being paused and all that. And if I can, then I'll often be like, so what are you actually, and I might coach, or like, so what are you actually feeling? Like, I hear what you're saying, and I'm more curious. I want to feel more, I want to invite you to be connected in like a very felt way. So I'm curious, what are you actually feeling right now? Or something like that. So there's any number of ways that a facilitator can direct someone to either coach them or ask them to share in a way that's more in tune with the practice. Decker was talking last night about being working in kind of corporate environment and being squeaky clean. Like, first of all, that like I need to actually I need to work on my stuff so that I'm not like the background of like when I'm pausing someone isn't like I'm annoyed that they stop things or that they're detracting, right? So I actually have to be clean enough and my emotions are centered enough so that I don't project that in the background if someone would be sensitive to that. And I think overall I think it's probably more connective, like rather than from like a facilitator's position to be like, okay, so just stop. Like, so you're talking a lot, and what are you actually feeling right now? Right? That's kind of a very directive thing. But if I actually give a bit of like my experience before that, so if I'm actually like, so hold on, I'm hearing and I acknowledge, like I'm hearing what you're saying, and I notice that I'm like losing you. Like I'm losing my felt connection with you as you're doing this, as you're speaking like this, and I have a desire to be more connected with you. So would you mind just stopping and just telling me actually what you're feeling right now? Would that be all right? Right. So actually sharing more from that place of what it's in service of, or what the place where I'm like owning, like very cleanly owning, like the place where I'm not feeling as connected and want to be more connected with this person. So or want them to be more dropped in here, or be connected in a way that's not judgmental. That's actually just like, not like, well, you're doing something that's not circling and it's not going to connect us. It's actually like, I'm not feeling connected with you and I actually want that. So would you mind, like, would it be alright with you if I just kind of stopped you, paused you? I'll give you one more tool, which is often, so we're kind of setting up the circles and we decided, okay, you're going to circle with this person and that person, and then we go into individual groups. One more time, I'm going, okay, we're going to go for this is how long we're going to go. I'm going to be facilitating. We're all going to be owning our experience. We're going to put attention on this person. We're just going to be getting their world, right? And as part of that, often what I'm doing is, or what some people have done, is like, so you're welcome to contribute. Everyone's welcome to contribute at any point. Right? It's very important to let people know how they can contribute. Otherwise, they'll feel like they're kind of don't have any options about how to participate, or unclear about how to participate, and they feel somewhat left out, or like they can't help but leave themselves out. And in that, in part of that explanation of like, you're welcome to share at any point what you're curious about or what your inquiry is, or what your experience is. And I may stop some of the people, like I may stop you if you're sharing, if something's happening that I'm seeing and you share something, I may stop you, or I may ask you to change how you're phrasing it or where you're coming from or what you're sharing if it seems like it's also outside of, it's not circling. And so just please know that I'll do that, and I ask that you, as much as you can, not take it personally, because I'm here just holding, I'm holding that role. And I'll be doing that in service of making sure as much as possible that we are actually staying in the form of circling and being with what's most alive in the circle as much as we can. So we'll often do that, and that'll also set a pretext for people to know that that's what the facilitator will be doing, and that they don't take it personally when they're asked to correct how they're talking about. We often, a while back, my mentor also often used to give an example of like the facilitator is here kind of like a yoga teacher, right? And like we're going to come in and we might just correct your form a bit. It's not that you're doing the pose wrong, and you might have learned how to do the pose different at a different kind of yoga school or yoga class, but we're just going to make sure that you're actually doing the pose the way that we do it here, in service of whatever our philosophy is, as opposed to the other one. And we're just here just to invite you to practice the form the way that we're practicing the form, and it's just in service of making sure that you're just a bit more in alignment with how the form that we're wanting to be in service of. So,
one question: when someone's in a birthday circle and they're sharing, do you ever invite them to ask for a response from certain people in the circle, or does that happen organically, or a bit of both?
So usually, so I'll do both.
Okay.
Like people have different ways they want to set up. So whatever your
So
style.
if I had a story about something, you can invite me to check it out by maybe asking for someone else's experience.
Yeah. So
Me or whatever.
it would be up to whatever your facilitation style is. Like if you're facilitating, it's like, do you want, like I'm like, well, whatever you want to share, and I'll deal with cleaning it up or whatever it is. Other people are like, well, if you want to share something, raise your hand, which can often be frustrating for people sometimes. So I try not to do that. Just take responsibility. Like I'll deal with cleaning it up.
Yeah.
And I also actively often, some circles I'm not gonna bother with trying to include people. There's so much going on that I have to keep track of already with the circle. Other times I'm actively like, oh, and where are you feeling? And I try to err more and more. The more I'm working on my abilities, the more and more I'm trying to err on the side of trying to be able to include more people in a way that is actually going to deepen things.
Okay.
So.
And do you have people be aware, even if it's in a debrief, of what came up for them? Just that's theirs too.
Yeah.
Yeah? So even if it was a birthday circle on you, as part of that debrief might be what came up for me that I'm now sitting with for myself.
I might be like, oh, and I noticed like you seem, and people, and we might be like, oh, you can be circled about that, or people might just share like, wow, I'm really moved, or I'm really upset, or whatever it is. And as part of that, like often the explanation we give is like, so I understand that's coming up for you, and so it's not just the circle who's going to get something out of the circle. You're going to discover things might come up for you as well, and it might be challenging. And at least as long as we're circling, as long as you're not the circlee, like we're in service of you being able to welcome that, so you can put it aside long enough that it can actually be with what their experience is.
And so if someone was giving someone feedback or sharing their experience, but it was obviously their story, do you ever just point that out? Like it seems like there's some of this issue, this relevant for you.
That becomes trickier and trickier to do,
that I think
on how aware that person is of their own experience, which is a whole other thing that we deal with.
But sometimes just to name it to support the person being circled, or to have them contain that, or to move on.
Yeah. So I might be like, I'm getting that's happening for you, and it actually doesn't seem like it's gonna help. Like that doesn't seem actually like what's happening for the circling, or what's gonna get us more with what's happening for the circling. So I appreciate you sharing that, and then
And that you're sitting with that for yourself.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm just thinking of all the things that happen.
Yeah. The other thing that I would really recommend is that as much as you can, find someone that you can trust to facilitate with.
Yeah.
It's been very hard for me often.
As a solo.
Yeah, to do it solo because I can't see my own blind spots.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'll often do a circle and I'm like, that didn't go quite as well as I wanted it to. Was it just me or them or and so I'm left alone kind of and I don't have anybody to check with, and it helps so much just to have someone else to be like, no, you were on, and then they, or no, actually you seem like you were upset about, like, background kind of triggered about this. Like, oh, okay, cool, can we explore that so that I can get clear about what's going on? So that helps a lot. It's been very lonely often to facilitate alone, so I really recommend finding someone you trust, their perspective can help you do that.